Hey everybody, hope everyone's having a great day out there. Following up on my last video where we talked about how Dragon Age Veilguard is far more than just a simple game, and actually more of a very strong ideological symbol for certain agendas being pushed into the games industry, we talked about just how much the game means for some people within the industry, how its failure is not an option, for it not only ties up similar financial and commercial flops from 2024, such as Soy Squad, Concord, Dustborn, Flintlock, and Unknown 9 Awakening, but it also sends a resounding message of consumer strength and unity against this type of politically charged content being put into beloved franchises or even other games in general that would have fared far better without it. And we went through some examples of the attempts at manipulating the narrative in regards to sales numbers, concurrent players, etc. from games journalists, gaming media outlets, and other assorted shills. Also, of course, trying to delegitimize the people criticizing the game as review-bombing scum that are only hating on it because of bigotry and grifting and blah 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 blah. Nothing we haven't heard before already with Star Wars Outlaws, for example. So this video will be tackling several parts of the makeup of Dragon Age Veilguard with actual information from personal experience with the game, regardless of the types of nonsense that they tell themselves to cope through all of these flops and of course the recent presidential election in the United States. I haven't finished the game yet, however, so stay tuned for more dissections in the future where I will tackle the rest of what I will not tackle here, especially to do with the story and the writing overall, and of course also calling out the lies and inconsistencies in the glowing reviews from the excess media. This will also help me not make a review video that is way too long as well. So let's get started.
Got a pencil? Get the fuck in there, it's physics.
I have around 53 hours of combined playthrough, 47 on my main save file where I'm playing as a warrior character, and then the rest on two separate characters where I tried out the other two classes, mage and rogue. So we are well beyond first impressions here. While I haven't finished the game yet, out of a desire to comb through everything and be as detailed as I can in my videos, I have seen and experienced most of what is on offer. And at its core, what is on offer is a game that is very detached from Dragon Age, which is not news for anyone following up on how it looked before launch, but just exactly how detached is it and exactly what does that mean, as well as how does it stand on its own? Well, let's get into it. At the core of Dragon Age, we have certain elements that were tied to its DNA. It's supposed to be an RPG, and by RPG I mean an actual RPG, not just an action game with RPG components, but a game with quite a bit of choice, consequence, and options, not just for shaping your character's personality and moral compass, but also options in how to complete certain objectives. It's also supposed to be a dark fantasy setting for mature audiences. This means the world is gritty, the story has stake, and is not afraid to brutally put those on display through brutal violence, darkness, and moral conundrums, which also expands itself to its characters. The dialogue in the earlier games knew when to take itself seriously and when to ease off the pedal to be humorous or establish relationships. And while there is a degree of difference between the first three Dragon Age games, which I suppose goes hand in hand with the overall decay of Bioware as a studio over time, those games still hold up today. At the core of Veilguard itself, these elements are either totally missing or they have been heavily altered and not in good ways. Thus far in my playthrough, the RPG aspect has been a complete joke. The game starts off by actually giving you an option to avoid combat in the intro scene right after you finish creating your character. You can select to fight a bunch of people in a bar, which if you do, it plays a pretty nice cutscene of your character taking them out, or you can choose to talk through it, which plays a different scene of your character convincing the boss lady to give you the information that you need without violence. 47 hours into my main save, this has not happened again. This game is heavily focused on combat. Avoiding fights and finding different ways to resolve conflicts or reach the goals of your quests is just not present. Early on in the game there was an instance where we have I guess we can call it a moral choice to make, but it was executed so poorly that calling it one is one hell of a stretch. Basically, you go to a blighted village, find out that the mayor of the village was corrupt, and offered up the village to one of the evil villains to be blighted for money. It's the most bare-bones basic, evil greedy mayor thing that I've ever seen. There is no moral conundrum in it either. You can either leave him to die or save him, and in my case, since I played as a warden, I could banish him to the wardens, which is what I did. Some companions agree, others disagree, it hardly really matters. Your companions' minds are set, you cannot make them like you anymore or dislike you anymore than they are already scripted to do. More on this later. At some other instance, for example, you are chasing after some cultists and you come upon a building. You have a note that you can read that tells you that there's an open window on the roof. But finding this note is a linear scripted thing as well. There is no other option for you to use the front door or anything like that. Furthermore, at some instances we can see little informational pop-ups that say when a character approved or felt some sort of emotion as a result of a choice that you made. For example, with Tash, at some point there's this thing that pops up if you answer positively towards her being Canary, Ravani, and some other bullshit that I already forgot. The little information bubble reads that you encourage Tash by focusing on the benefits of a multicultural background, but if you choose the negative option, the outcome is the exact same. It just says that Tash felt encouraged by focusing on the challenges of a multicultural background. Dialogue in the following scene happens anyway. And there is a lot of instances where this happens, to the point where I even stopped wasting my time by reloading dialogues. The reactions you get from your companions remain largely the same. There is not much of a unique interaction or relationship that you can form with them. Disagreeing with them or disappointing them or having adverse opinions is not really something that happens, it's not allowed, there are no options for it, and on the very rare occasions where you do have something along those lines, it doesn't amount to anything either. There is no point at which a character can disapprove of you so much that they just leave the party, as is present in other RPGs. Even some RPGs that got their RPG elements severely watered down, like Fallout 4 for example. Piss someone off enough times by doing actions and making quest decisions that they don't like or that aligns with factions that they oppose, and they will leave you permanently.
No fucking more. We are done.
Are you really gonna leave? Is there anything I can do to stop you?
You got all the chances you're gonna get. As a courtesy, I won't cut your throat right here, but I see you again. I can't promise I'll be so polite.
This reminds me, we need to talk about these factions in a bit. Worse than that though, the game trivializes even main choices and events in the story itself. Take for example, the first major decision that you have to do. Two dragons are attacking two different cities simultaneously. You will have to decide which one to go help and which one to leave to its own fate. The city that you help will be just fine, you'll be able to head back, continue your side quests, etc. But the city that you doom will be impacted. Side quests will either disappear or be put on hold, and the environments will change as well. In my playthrough, I chose to go help Minrathous and turned my back on Treviso. When I returned to Treviso, it was caked in blight. But let's back up a second to exactly why this nonsense got me laughing my ass off and ranting to my girlfriend for a solid 20 minutes. When you reach the city, the dragon is attacking, so you run around until you get to the open area where you will be finding the prick. One of the main villains of the game, an elven god, shows up, does a ridiculous cartoon villain speech, demands that you hand over a very special dagger, and when you refuse, it sicks the dragon on you. So you fight the dragon for a bit until you drop its health down to about a quarter, and then the evil elven god villain does some more evil villain nonsense speak and says to the dragon that their strength is needed elsewhere. And then they leave. So for full context here, this dagger that the elven god demanded that you give her is extremely important to the story. It belongs to Solus, and it is the most precious thing that these evil gods need to achieve their main objective. When you obtained it earlier in the fucking game during another quest, the gods were pissed. Also, they are incredibly powerful. The game starts by presenting Solus as an immensely powerful god that the crew does not stand a chance against in a straight up fight. That is why no one bothers to fight Solus. What you do is disrupt the ritual by dropping statues on the motherfucker. Then, through more exposition, these two evil gods that slipped out of the Fade are presented as even more powerful than Solus. They are so powerful that it took Solus thousands of years, according to him, of trickery, lies and power plays in order to get them imprisoned. So needless to say that this fucking tentacle abomination could have easily decimated the entire party in one move. She wouldn't even need the dragon, and even the dragon itself is already presented as a difficult challenge for the crew. So what the fuck is this?
Gillenane.
We need only one thing from you. Surrender it, and you may go. Give up the Dread Wolf's dagger.
Come get it.
By force, then. Whatever remains of you will become my new creations. We have toyed with these mortals long enough. Your strength is needed elsewhere. Hear my voice and return.
It's gone, but it's wounded.
What are you, fucking stupid?
What is this? Who the fuck wrote this? Is this what Bioware has denigrated itself to? Not only do we have to deal with some of the cringiest dialogue, but I also have to deal with atrocious storytelling that doesn't even make a single fucking bit of sense. They need that dagger. She knows we have it. We cannot stand a chance against her, let alone her and her dragon, and she just up and leaves. Well, even though we've got the dagger that I need so much in order to complete my villainous plans, I am going to leave because I've got shit to do. Ta-ta! What is she, fucking stupid?
Yes, she's retarded.
So the RPG aspect is totally boned, your dialogue options and relationships don't matter, the only different kind of deviation you can get from your companions is if you choose to romance them or be friends. Your specializations have some instances where relevant dialogue options are used, so for example as a warden, I had some warden specific replies here and there, but overall your experience is very tailored and linear. Your quests have one direction that they follow and you can't do anything to change them. No fights you can avoid, no special opportunities to exploit, etc. Your dialogues are also mostly one-dimensional as well. Most of the time you'll have three options, being your normal positive self, being your normal positive self but with a bit of levity, or be your normal positive self but more straight to the point. And sometimes what you're reading is completely different from what you're going to say. There was this moment where I was visiting the first warden, which as a warden character I have a bad past with because part of your backstory of your character as a warden is disobeying orders. The first warden throws that at your face immediately, and so since I was there to get their support, I chose the most humble option possible. My intent was that I would acknowledge the mistakes of the past in hopes that they would listen to my warning about the Blight and the gods and etc. Instead, my rook just spews out bullshit from the other two dialogue options that I did not want to express. Why is this? Well, because this interaction had to end on a bad note. It was scripted to do so that Dorian from Dragon Age Inquisition could come in and save you from being thrown into jail, and this perfectly encapsulates the majority of the dialogue choices in this game. It's an illusion of choice. The game isn't just linear in its level design, it is linear in its storytelling, and this is disappointing as hell, to be honest. So what about the dark fantasy aspect? Well, this is even more damaged than the RPG aspect. You already have one example where this overpowered elven god just up and leaves, making a complete joke out of the stakes and out of itself as a supposedly ultra evil, ultra powerful and ultra intelligent character. But the dark fantasy aspect is also heavily diluted in other areas such as the dialogue situation that I described about companions and not being able to have disagreements or anything of the such with them. This goes for every interaction I had. I haven't had a single interaction in this game that was like intense. The overall art style of the game is another problem. Even when it's trying to depict violence, like when you see your character's blood spilled in the intro of the game, it looks terrible. It looks worse than ketchup. And when trying to depict blighted areas, it suffers from the same issue. There is this very obvious problem going on here where this art style is simply incompatible with the darker aspects of the Dragon Age series, such as the Blight and the Darkspawn. It makes everything look like a Pixar movie no matter what. Like, look at this shit. Look at these designs for these Darkspawn as well. They look so goofy. I swear it looks like something out of one of those cartoony PS2 video games, like Spyro or Ratchet & Clank. And then if the writing for the dialogue and the directing and presentation of the scenes were mature, at least you could have something. But when all of this fails to show up, it strips the darkness right out of the dark fantasy, and it kills any stakes that it's trying to set, including emotional attachments to characters. This is present in far more ways than one. The writing and directing is abysmal and a huge contributing factor as to why this game would be a problem, even if it was a brand new IP completely detached from the Dragon Age brand. Let me give you another example. So early in the game you get to go to Treviso to recruit the assassin. You get there and boom, you get a revelation that the assassin you're trying to hire, aka Lucanus, has been dead for a year. Right in the exact same scene, the matriarch of the family reveals that, oh no, he's actually alive. The corpse that had been sent back to her was altered by blood magic and was actually not Lucanus, her grandson.
What brings you here?
Right. My target is a pair of elven gods, or that's what they call themselves. They're ancient blighted mages. My detective says you have a man who brought blood mages and Venatori to their knees.
Lucanus. My grandson. They called him the Demon of Virantium. He was the one who did those jobs.
Sounds like there's more to it.
Lucanus de la Morte is dead. He was killed a year ago now.
What I say doesn't leave this room. The body our people brought back was not my grandson. It was dressed in his clothing, but it had been altered with blood magic to have his face.
My cousin is still alive? And you didn't think to tell me?
His ship was attacked. We knew someone sold him out. So you kept your suspicions to yourself.
But you brought it up now. Why?
I've had eyes on the Venatori ever since they took my grandson from me. They were hunting your dread wolf. And what you did to his ritual threw them into disarray. They made mistakes, and now I have a location. The Ossuary, where the demon of Virantium is kept.
First, this entire scene is devoid of the actual drama necessary to convey a family, because this is a family, by the way, composed of brothers and cousins and shit like that, finding out that one of their own, who has been believed to be dead for a year, is actually alive. It's also devoid of the drama necessary to convey the pure what the fuckium that would be the fact that this woman kept this as a secret from her very own inner circle, again, her family. And that's not to mention the utter retardation of the concept itself. This woman is a matriarch of a family of incredibly able assassins and the leader of a faction of even more assassins, and she does nothing to try and save her grandson's life. She just sits on the fact that he's actually alive for a year before you coincidentally disrupt Solus's ritual, which causes her to somehow learn the location of her grandson. Also worth noting that quite some time went by between the ritual and the actual moment where you meet these people, so this dumb fuck has been sitting on the location of her grandson without it telling anyone about it, including her very own family, and not making a single move to actually go and get him saved. You could totally make an argument that she couldn't let the faction know since there's a suspicion of a traitor on the inside, but there is no argument for her to not tell her inner circle anytime sooner, her actual family. This kind of thing happens again too. Immediately as you finish saving Lucanus and return to Treviso, it is revealed that there was an attack and that the grandmother was killed. It was delivered in the same incredibly flat and pointless manner, no fucking emotion whatsoever, and so poorly directed that if not for their words pointing out that that there was an attack, you wouldn't even notice that it happened. Everyone is just straight up chilling and going back to their business immediately. The scene plays abruptly too. There's no setup, which could have actually been used to show the player that, oh, there was an attack. Like for example broken furniture, maybe some corpses, something like that. But there's nothing. You cut straight to the hideout and at first glance everything looks the exact same. At second glance, from repeating the scene, you can actually see some papers on the ground, but there's not much else going on either. Like, how can you be this bad at directing a scene? Holy shit, if we go back to Skyrim 13 years ago and use the killing of Kodlak, the Harbinger of the Companions, as an example, you go off on a quest with Vilkas, and when you return, you actually walk up to the steps of the Companions' longhouse. Outside, you immediately have several members of the Companions standing over corpses of the attackers with their weapons drawn. If you click on them, they say what happened, and then when you walk inside the Companions' longhouse, Kodlak is laying dead on the ground with some other members of the Companions around him, mourning. In Veilguard, the game thrusts you into a scene, you don't even know what happened, cause all that you see are some papers on the fucking floor, someone says that there was an attack, Lucanus asks for the grandma, and some other dipshit whose name I already forgot just says that the Venatori got her in the confusion. It is so devoid of emotion and impact. It feels like I am playing a bottom budget video game. Or one of those shitty live services where the story doesn't even matter, all that matters is the loot. But hold on, because it actually gets worse. Very soon after that, Lucanus asks you to come with him to the funeral, and this made me lose my shit laughing as well, because there was no funeral. You get there, you talk to Taya, which is one of those people from the inner circle, like one of the people in the family, and her cousin or her brother or her fucking husband. I have no goddamn idea, and I honestly don't even care. The point is that you talk to two people. There's some casual banter over who goes to get the ashes. Finally, the other dude goes off and gets them, and you, Lucanus and Taya talk a little bit more. Just a couple more lines of dialogue about how Lucanus used to be the grandmother's favorite, I don't know, adopted grandson or whatever. The fucking scene fades to black and the quest is completed. I shit you not, guys, there was no funeral. The entire place looked business as usual, literally just a regular assassin's bureau with all the NPCs littered about, and the moron who went to get the ashes did not return. Nothing more happened. I was legitimately stunned and waiting for the rest of the goddamn scene to play out. I scoured my journal to see if I missed any quest marker, but no. That was it. That was the entire funeral. Again, Skyrim 13 years ago, you return from your revenge trip and you walk up to the Skyforge where Kodlak's funeral is taking place. There is a pyre atop the Skyforge and there are a bunch of NPC characters paying their respects. Important NPCs, by the way, not random ones, like actual characters from Whiterun. Someone gives a eulogy to send Kodlak off, and then the people remain there as his body burns. The members of the circle are summoned to go to the Underforge, which is a secret location, so that they can continue to plan the rest of the quest. How is it possible that Bioware is incapable of doing story scenes better than a game that doesn't even fucking have cutscenes in it? I will never know. This is objectively the worst state that Bioware has ever been in when it comes to writing and storytelling. This shit heavily impacts the relationships that you build with your companions. There's no other outlet for which to let them shine through. Golden opportunities to flesh out Lucanus and give you a chance to speak to him about himself are totally wasted because you can't even do a funeral properly. Now let's talk about the factions, which also relate to this point of having a totally diluted fantasy setting. This game is so incredibly concerned with looking good, as in morally good and politically correct, that everything loses its meaning and is watered down. Turns out I was right in my other video where I showed these screenshots here of this writer talking about how they had removed certain aspects of the game and lore, such as blood magic and red lyrium, from the use of the protagonist or other characters in our group or characters in factions that we associate with, because of them being inherently evil and the developers wanting to tell a clear story. this is what I said in my video. All of which is bullshit language for, we are not going to be bothered with writing interesting, compelling characters and stories, our heroes will all be incredibly fucking stale and one-dimensional, right alongside our incredibly stale and one-dimensional villains, and player choice will be completely watered down to be playing as a lame one-dimensional blank hero who only has one path, insofar as his demeanor and in the direction that the story goes. And it was dead on, because not only did this happen exactly because indeed Rook is one-dimensional, there isn't anything to be done in terms of laying out a personality for him through dialogue options or choices or anything else, and of course so are all of our companions, but on top of that it also went and impacted the factions in the world building itself. The Wardens, which are supposed to be Darkspawn killing machines, can look like this. Because of course we cannot just depict them as incredibly hardened warriors who went through a nightmarish fucking ritual in which most of them die in order to turn them into monster killers. The Antivan Crows, right, the assassins, they aren't even assassins. They have to be shifted into more of this assassin freedom fighter sort of hybrid faction, where apparently they are the only ones defending Treviso against armies. That doesn't even make any goddamn sense. They're supposed to be contract killers that never deny a contract, but at the same time, they do deny contracts. They only kill evil villains. And some of them look so soy as well. Look how soy this dude looks. My god, is this even a fucking grown-up? It looks like a child. Behold, the face of an assassin. The Lords of Fortune are another funny one. This is supposed to be a band of adventurers, thieves and treasure hunters. Lara Croft, Indiana Jones or Nathan Drake type of people. They are supposed to scour ruins for treasure, do dangerous delves, and even sneak into dragon hordes to steal anything important of value. They're also supposed to take contracts, either to get something specific from someone or someplace, or to protect expedition crews on their own treasure hunts. But at the very same time, they are supposed to only steal from the rich, and according to Tash, they are also very conscious of what they take, because they want to separate themselves from like the British Museum. Oh no, they always take cultural significance into account to make sure that they are not taking anything from any specific culture.
Feel free to use the ancient elven artifacts for weight training, but nothing leaves with you, okay?
Don't worry about that. The Lords of Fortune aren't thieves.
I mean, aren't you though?
Nah. Anything we hunt is salvage. Old forgotten ruins and crap. And we make sure we're not screwing over a culture that lost it. That's what my mother does with the Kunari stuff.
You serious?
And so supposedly they return some of these items that they fucking steal back to their cultures, which is just more of this stupid modern social justice mindset that is just boring. This is boring. This completely neuters the concept of adventurous, exciting treasure hunters, and it also does not fit into the setting. You are telling me that these people in this fantasy setting are fucking concerned with cultural appropriation? Are you telling me that Isabella, the saucy pirate lady from Dragon Age 2 who wanted to bang everyone in a 10-mile radius, gives half a shit about this nonsense? What are you fucking stupid? Like, how can you make an RPG and screw up the fucking concept of a treasure hunter? What kind of a pussy-ass milquetoast nonsense is this? And it doesn't even make sense either. They're supposed to be a successful guild. This means that they have to make money. But if the treasure that they hunt is just fucking delivered to their cultures, then what money are they making? And then there's the contracts. Who else but rich people have money to hire the Lords of Fortune to steal stuff or hunt for some treasure? Who the fuck is paying them to steal from the supposed rich, if not other rich people who can afford those contracts in the first place? And then what if what they're stealing, or what if what they find while on these protection contracts and expeditions belongs to a different culture? Do they rip the contracts right there and then, kick the contractor down a mineshaft, and take the treasure they just found to their supposed cultural owners? Like, oh my fucking god. How did Bioware fall this fucking far? This is insane. This is beyond embarrassing. This game has no metaphorical balls. It is so incredibly concerned with optics that it can't even present morally grey characters. Everyone has to be a perfect representation of the most basic concept of good, including the factions. So any factions the player or the companions are associated with are the pinnacle of objective goodness, and then all the others are the pinnacle of irredeemable evil. This is boring. There's no excitement, there's no coolness, there's no friction between your crew, there's no role-playing, there's no moral conundrums to keep you awake, there's no options to shape your character and your journey, there's no true choice or consequence, there's no engaging and compelling villains, everyone just talks like fucking Dr. Doom, everything is just white noise. And if this is any indication of what the next Mass Effect game will be like, then we may as well just forget about it already. Gameplay. So let's talk about the gameplay instead, barring of course the missing RPG mechanics that we just went over. This is the part where we have to interpret things in two different ways. One is, of course, how does this fit into the Dragon Age series, and the other is, how does it do on its own as its own thing, as if it was like a new IP, for example. The structure of the game world is fine. It's not open world, it's more linear. Personally, I still preferred Inquisition's approach of making areas slightly bigger, so that we could explore and complete side quests in, because it added more to the world, it made things appear bigger, which also increased the scope of the fantasy world. My issue with Inquisition was that it needed better quality content to fill those gaps, so that things would not be so samey, repetitive, and draining. Make no mistake, if this had Inquisition's open area design, it would make Veilguard so much worse because of the other issues that we'll get into in a second. So all in all, what we have here on its own isn't too bad. The issue with smaller, more linear level design is that you better be damn good at it so that your gameplay loop remains fun, rewarding, and engaging. And in the case of the areas that you travel through, Veilguard did okay. Some areas are better designed than others, nothing really stands out as an accomplishment, but nothing also stands out as terrible. That's not to say that the game does not have problems with the gameplay loop, it absolutely does, but it mainly comes from other issues that we will get into in a bit. Your exploration of any given area is very limited and linear, but the attention given to the animations and fluidity in running around, jumping around and climbing makes it work. I especially like the feature where some paths are blocked until you unlock a new ability through a new companion. Nothing new of course, but personally I do enjoy this kind of element in the games that I play. For example, the recent God of War games, Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, and Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden. Usually this type of feature gives people a reason to return and unlock a new optional section, leading to more loot. It increases the game world size in a more organic and interconnected way, which personally I've always loved to see. So it's a nice addition to Veilguard, even though it doesn't do it nearly as well as the games that I just mentioned. Usually it just opens a small path to an additional chest or so. The problems show up when you are given side quests, which take you back to the very same tight linear areas that you already explored, and make you go through them again and again and again and again and again anytime that a new side quest is put in that area. And it's even worse in the city areas such as Treviso and Minrathous. It gets tiresome and old to go through all of these areas again, so I just use fast travel for the most part, even though the environments are very small. Naturally, none of this shit that I'm describing right now sounds like Dragon Age, but, well, it is what it is. It's whatever nuggets of positivity that you can take out of the Veilguard. A game that completely detached itself from what Dragon Age should be. What you find going around are the occasional piece of gear for your character or your companions and the occasional crafting component, gold or valuables to sell at merchants in return for more gold. While grabbing a new armor or weapon is good, given how some of them actually look pretty good, I can't say that they changed the gameplay experience very much at all. And this is because the combat system is incredibly basic. I have heard people compare this to Hogwarts Legacy. I fucking wish it would be comparable to Hogwarts Legacy, to be honest, but it's just not. The combat in that game is far more creative and allows for far more variation. It's not a deep system, don't get me wrong, but it is far more complex than Veilguard. So for example, in Hogwarts Legacy, you have all of these spells that behave very differently. This allows you to be able to string together all manner of combos, juggling enemies up in the air. You can levitate your enemies to initiate a juggle, or you can cast Accio on them to drag them towards you. You can combine basic casts with other spells. You can either keep them in the air, draw them towards you, bounce them off the ground, or eject them. You've got explosive spells, cutting spells, icy spells, fiery spells, Fusroda spells, etc. And even the forbidden spells such as Avada Kedavra, which, if you play your cards right and mark loads of enemies on screen, it allows you to instantly kill anyone, including multiple enemies at once. And of course, let's not forget the special abilities with the special meter, of course, which come from your power in the game, you know, the ancient magic. Furthermore, there are other types of combinations that you can fuck with, like for example you can freeze enemies and then you can use Defindo to cut them up, you can use Incendio on some enemies and then blow them up with a basic cast, you can cast Expelliarmus on an enemy with a sword or an axe or whatever, and then you can fling their own weapon at them, etc. It's a combat system that can be very engaging because of the actual versatility of the spells. If you're fighting on a cliff, for example, you can maneuver around your enemies, lift them up and depulso them off of it. Then there's also the enemy types that often have unique weaknesses to be exploited. Like for example, there's this weird creature thing that attacks you with its tongue. It's a very heavy creature, so it doesn't allow you to levitate them, but if you cast Levioso at just the right moment in one of their attacks, you can levitate them by their tongue, and if you cast Defindo, you can even cut their tongue off, dealing a lot of damage. There was even people who found out that they could cast Levioso on boxes and barrels and whatnot and use them against the enemies without the actual combat mechanic. It was a very creative and even broken way to do damage, but not easy to get right. You can also turn enemies into loot when you learn and master transformation spells, and like I said, you have so many different ways to juggle your enemies and keep devastating combos going. Basically, there's way more depth in this combat system than you will ever find in Veilguard. And a lot of this is thanks to the progression system itself. In Hogwarts Legacy, when you level up you gain talents, and the talents are all very useful and heavily impact your gameplay. Your unlocks are composed of actually mechanical upgrades, like for example being able to power up your spells, levitating 3 morons at once instead of just one, or having your Incendio spell cast a ring of fire around you, or having Confringo send out flaming orbs against your enemies, adding shockwaves to Descendo, big fucking explosions with Bombarda, the aforementioned ability to turn enemies into loot, etc. And that's just one of the trees. Then there's the Dark Arts tree, which is all about propagating your curses. The faster and more efficient you are at cursing your enemies, the faster you can unleash that Avada Kedavra, killing all of them in one shot. There's some less prominent trees, but all in all, most of the talent points that you spend are going to be very impactful to your build. So, do you get what I mean here? Tangible upgrades that actually impact your gameplay directly, and a bunch of variety in your abilities. You can equip up to 4 spell setups, each with 4 different spells, and switch between them on the fly, giving you access to 16 different abilities at once in any given combat encounter. Veilguard, on the other hand, is a completely different combat and progression structure. The skill tree is far more reminiscent of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where you've got a whole ass constellation of mini buffs to unlock on your way to a main ability. Stuff like a bit more percentage of critical damage or a bit more elemental damage, the occasional additional mini ability like an extra move at the end of a charge attack, or an explosive effect to your ranged attack, or shield bash, or that sort of thing. There are loads of these things, and at the end of the day, outside of unlocking a new ability, most of these mini buffs are not going to be felt, and it makes gaining skill points be very uneventful. I only ever go and actually use them when I have 3 or 4 of them already unspent, because I already know that if I only have 1 skill point from 1 level up, I am not really going to reach any ability, so I just kinda don't bother with them until I have enough that I know that I'm going to be able to reach a main ability. The abilities are also very samey. Their damage numbers vary by tiers. Each tier consumes an additional bit of rage for warriors, mana for mages, or momentum for rogues. Basically the same shit. It's a little meter that you have that fills up as you attack people or don't get hit, etc. Their effects vary from class to class, but they are not very different from each other, and do not provide any opportunities to diversify your playstyle. In other words, you cannot use them to propel enemies into combos or anything of the such. The closest you'll get is, for example, the warrior starts off with a kick ability that lets you kick some enemies off of ledges and kill them instantly. The only other thing to mention here is the synergy effects. You can sometimes pair your abilities with those of others in your team to cause elemental explosions. The game shows you exactly which go with which others so that you don't miss out on doing these for extra damage. But yeah, it's not really born out of player ingenuity. Like in Hogwarts Legacy, the game doesn't necessarily tell you to use the Findo to cut a tongue off of an enemy that you just levitated by their tongue, nor does it tell you that crushing or slicing an iced enemy can deal crazy damage. But whatever, I guess in this case I'm just nitpicking. No problem at all in the game actually telling us what abilities go with what other abilities so that we can actually set up these explosions. After all, we really fucking need them because some of these fights are so long. I spent 15 minutes wailing on the same boss at one point and it was fucking terrible. The game doesn't have difficult combat at all, it just has enemies that are total damage sponges. The way that they move and attack leave much to be desired, especially since they shifted their attention to make this a standard active combat system. I would not have the same complaints if this was a more tactical game like the past games, but as it stands, it's all very basic and weightless. Nothing requires skillful mastery, just press light attack when the enemy has a red health bar, press heavy attack when an enemy has a yellow health bar, and press ranged attack when an enemy has a blue health bar, while waiting for your meter to increase so that you can use special abilities along with your companions. That's it. Rinse and repeat for God knows how many more hours I will have to spend playing this game. Nothing really changes and the variety in the combat is terrible. You can equip 3 fucking abilities and you can't even change them in the midst of combat. In Inquisition you could at least equip up to 8 abilities at once and use them all in battle. In here you have 3. You have 3, fellas. That's it. I don't want to sound super negative here. The combat system is not like downright terrible, it's decent, but what makes it terrible is that there is a complete lack of variety and complexity, and it gets very old very fast because the game also drags on and on and on. I wish that the game at least allowed us to switch classes mid-game. I know that this is not a Dragon Age feature at all either, but then again, the game already threw away so many of Dragon Age classic features out the window. What would be the problem of throwing one more out of the window for the sake of letting players having a little bit more variety in the midst of their playthroughs? At least when you got sick of seeing the same shit over and over and over as a warrior, you could switch to a mage and play a little bit differently, and then to a rogue, etc. Although I gotta say, rogue is by far the worst one. Both the mage and the warrior have alternate weapons that they can switch to. Warriors have a sword and a shield stance, and then they have a big axe. They play largely the same way, light attack for red bars, heavy attack for yellow bars, and ranged attack for blue bars, but at least it changes things a little bit. Mages have a staff for ranged and area of effect attacks, and then a magical sword and a magical orb for melee and short ranged attacks, and then an additional ranged attack through a beam of magic. Rogues haven't got shit to switch to. You have 2 daggers to use and a bow at your back. You cannot switch to any other weapon or any other stance. It's the same system with the collars, but whenever you press the ranged attack, your character fires a shot from the bow. So I would imagine that people playing rogues are getting even more sick of the combat far earlier than myself. My combat encounters at 47 hours in are not that much different from my combat encounters in the first 10 hours. There just really isn't much here. There's no new things being introduced to change your build, there's nothing with a learning curve to master, it mostly develops into a game of numbers. Just get the most damaging abilities and get your mini buffs along the way so that you can do more damage and receive less damage. That's about it. So, what if Dragon Age Veilguard was not a Dragon Age game? Would it still be getting the hate that it gets? Would it be far better experience without the weight of the Dragon Age franchise pulling it down? Well, yes and no on both counts. If this wasn't Dragon Age and it was a new IP, it would definitely be getting far less backlash because there wouldn't be this magnanimous franchise for people to point and draw so many comparisons that leave Veilguard looking like an embarrassment. Take this game here for example, Immortals Phoenix Rising, formerly known as Gods and Monsters. It's a Ubisoft game that basically took Zelda and Assassin's Creed Odyssey and mashed them together. As its own thing, It worked pretty well actually, just some fun little open world game in stylized graphics, some basic combat mechanics, basic progression and a lot of puzzles, a humorous story in Greek mythology narrated with some comical relief. But if this game was actually named Assassin's Creed, you bet your ass that it would have been dragged through the mud. It doesn't mean that every single flaw that it has would be discounted as just a feature of a new IP, but it does mean that some of its unique quirks that are not to our personal taste could be attributed as a feature of this new IP. And I think that the same sort of thing could have happened with some aspects of Veilguard, such as the art style and the character design. The characters and environments look far too cartoonish for a Dragon Age game, but maybe as a new IP, it wouldn't be standing out as such a major flaw. The same goes for the decision of presenting a far less dark world, and a cast of characters that behaves very unnaturally, and factions that are boring and watered down. These are all elements that this new Bioware team changed because, well, shit, you'd have to ask them, but in my opinion, only one of two things happened. One, they deeply misunderstand what Dragon Age is, while calling us tourists, which is funny as fuck, or two, they understood just fine, but they just didn't care. They wanted to change the identity of Dragon Age and reboot it to something else entirely. Its connection to Dragon Age completely derails so many of their decisions in every element of this game. The combat, the RPG mechanics, the dialogue system, the choice and consequence, the new style, the atmosphere, new characters, which we'll get into in a future video, the childish story with no stakes or maturity, etc. All of these items could be somewhat tolerated, or at least taken less negatively, if not for the direct association with Dragon Age, which had all of these aspects with such strength. But even still, would that mean that Veilguard could be a successful game as its own original IP? I still don't think so. And this is because of everything else that composes it. Bad writing, for example, is just bad writing, no other way around it. It doesn't matter what IP you're creating. If you're trying to do some sort of action game with light RPG elements, you still need good writing and compelling characters. And sadly, these are not present here at all. My favorite companion so far is Rai TheNoblesse, and this is because so far, she has been the least retarded one. I was going to make a joke about like how Balara acts like a child and how Harding is the most fucking boring try-hard character I've ever seen, how Lucanus it's just a fucking guy who likes coffee, Davron has been alright so far, and Emmerich has also been okay, and on the other hand, Tash has been a complete mess. I will be dedicating an entire video to her alone. There are a lot of issues with this character and the representation that is being attempted to be done through her. It is so bad that it almost looks like it was designed by someone trying to mock non-binary people rather than represent them, and making them look terrible. It's so out of touch, it's crazy, but I can't. I really do mean it. I am actually being serious. Nave is the only character so far that has been written in a non-retarded way. She is more mature than everyone else. She doesn't wallow in self-pity. She doesn't do any fucking stupid little social justice nonsense. And I don't know, she talks a little bit more about her work. Meanwhile, with Lucanus, for example, it's just the dude likes his coffee. That's about all that I know about him. Davron is the monster hunter. He has a little fucking griffin that he takes care of. There's not much going on there. But anyway, with good writing and compelling characters missing, and a story that is comically stupid with certain moments like the one I mentioned before, making a complete joke out of its villains or out of serious situations, you already have three very damning elements that are going to make your game be very problematic no matter what name it is under. And the gameplay is the other issue. As mentioned in the previous section, it is not a terrible system, but it is terribly lacking in variety, and since the game constantly pushes the player into combat, you end up overusing it and getting drained of playing the exact same combat encounters the exact same way over and over again. Unlike Dragon Age Inquisition, you can't even switch to other characters to play as them, so that you can mix up your gameplay experience a little bit more. And God help you if you're trying to complete the game or do side quests and exploration to try and not miss anything, because this is going to triple the amount of combat encounters that you will be getting into. If at least this aspect had been worked on a little bit more, at least if this game's combat system was more robust and added more variety, I could see this as a standalone IP that could have its value despite the story, the writing and the characters, and vice versa too. If the characters were really good and the dialogue and the writing, then I could see it having its its own value as well, even if the combat got repetitive. But half-assing both of these elements makes for a very hard game to recommend. And so, in conclusion, this is not a Dragon Age game, it's not an RPG, it's not an action game. It has dialogue but bad writing, it has choices but no different paths to take, no consequences to deal with. It presents itself as the biggest the stakes have ever been in the stories of Dragon Age, with two evil, tyrannical, blighted gods on the loose, but we never see them, and when we do, they do stupid shit like letting the protagonist get away with the precious artifact that they require to destroy the world. We also see what happened to the factions in the game and the way that the morality of it all works, where everything associated with a player has to be good, even if it's a guild of thieves or assassins. No role-playing opportunities are allowed at all because anything questionable would be a narrative problem for Bioware. Only thing left really was going like, oh, the Antam used swords and axes and hammers, so we didn't really want to give the players the ability to use swords, axes and hammers either, so as to not complicate our storytelling. This is not the direction that we want our heroes to go down, so they will have to use their words and friendship to solve conflicts. But hey, you never know, maybe if BlackRock funds the next Dragon Age game, we will be able to see this in action, as well as with a bunch more of far-left ideological injections trying to tell us what is the correct way to behave, and the correct way to think, the correct way to be, alongside other subtle and not so subtle garbage like presenting wardens and assassins as characters that look like fucking children, and watering down the races of Qunari, dwarves and elves to ethnically diverse human faces with horns and pointy ears, instead of a focus in making their fantasy setting truly look and feel like an escape from our lived reality. Instead, they look and sound like downtown LA, modern day people. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like the video if you indeed liked it, and subscribe for follow-ups and also to help me with my sanity. I prefer doing these sort of review videos like this, at least for Veilguard, so that it gives me more time to reflect on what I'm playing and also to put videos together rather than releasing one super long video. Have yourselves a great day, and I will see you on the next one, or down in the comments in case you guys have any suggestions, feedback, or any opinions of your own in regards to the Veilguard.